Welcome back, everyone. It's the review, episode 16 of season 1. Glad to have you back on. This is Brendon Hodges here, the host of CBB Review's flagship podcast. It's becoming a little bit of a pattern with these episodes, guys. We're recording on Monday mornings now, and it seems like only one person can come in on Monday mornings. I'll leave it at that until he actually comes into this meeting. For now, though, we'll get to my starting five, and I was watching ESPN's front page yesterday, getting ready for this episode. And the big game yesterday was obviously Michigan coming off of a COVID pause, playing against a Big Ten foe, Wisconsin. Now, we'll talk about that game a little bit later, actually right after this. So I'm not going to go too much in depth about it until then. But I think that it's fair to say that in casual conversation, people are looking at teams like Chicago State, and I believe one other team, Maine, opted out of their season this last weekend. And people are looking at those teams that are opting out late, that are maybe 2-7, 1-8, thinking, oh, they're losing a lot, so they're opting out of their season, and it really just, in a sense, doesn't count. No, that is not why they're opting out of their season, people. Let me put this into context a little bit. So as you all know, at least I hope you know to this point, I am a graduate student at Syracuse University who has done a fantastic job in terms of providing different sorts of COVID tests. I do not believe they have done the nasal swab. They did a saliva swab where you have like a little Q-tip, you stick it in your mouth, you swab it around for 30 seconds, it comes back in like a day. We've been doing a saliva tube test this semester where you spit into a literal plastic tube and it comes back the same day. Are they as effective? I don't know. But a university like Syracuse has the money to afford that for not just student athletes, but also for their entire student body. Do you think the University of Maine has enough money to do that, even just for their athletics program? Do you think that maybe it's not because they're losing all their games, but because they can't keep up with testing in order to compete, whether it's in conference or out of conference against the bigger schools? Just a thought to think about. When schools like Michigan come off a COVID pause, they can afford to do that because they're Michigan. They're a big brand in college basketball. You won't see a Duke or a North Carolina or a Gonzaga or a UCLA or even an Ohio State, Sam Bass's perennial national championship contender, mind you, shut down a season due to COVID. You just won't see it, but you'll see these smaller schools do that. So let's stop saying that they're opting out of their season because they're losing. No, they're opting out of their season because we're in the middle of a pandemic and they don't have the resources that a lot of the other bigger schools do in order to stay in it. With that, we'll go ahead and bring in our panelist today. You guys know him. You love him. He's your Monday morning specialist. He is Matt Karner, coming to us live from somewhere, a covert site in the middle of the Midwestern United States. Matt, this is becoming a pattern here, and I really do feel sorry for you because I've really wrecked you the last couple times you were on in terms of trivia. And today I've gone a little easy on you. We'll get to that in the C block. But how you doing, man? Good to see you again.
I'm doing well. It's pretty cold up here in Wisconsin, but I'm surviving.
Cold in Wisconsin. How cold, sir? How cold?
I believe this morning when I woke up, it was -30 with a -45 wind chill.
Well, you see, we have you beat there, not in terms of it being cold, but the fact that we're under a winter storm warning as of about an hour ago until tomorrow at 4. So I understand that it may be cold up there, but you won't be getting any snow because that's not how weather works. We'll stick to basketball, though, here. So I'm assuming that you watched at least a little bit of that Big Ten matchup yesterday. We talked about it on Friday with Steve Kirk and Sam Bass. It was one of the biggest stories going into this weekend. Michigan off of a long hiatus in college basketball, right off of their first loss, actually, that took them down from the ranks of the undefeated. First game in a couple weeks, playing Wisconsin, 2 ranked teams. Does Michigan have rust? They had rust in the first half. They were down 12 going into the half, and I can't say I know what Juwan Howard told his team at halftime, but I have to assume it was something like, boot up the butt, let's get things going here. and they doubled up Wisconsin in the second half, outscored them 40-20, which you just don't see really in college basketball with two teams of that level of play. So Michigan, they get the win. It wasn't pretty in the first half. It was a lot better in the second half. They go to 14-1, 8-1 in the Big Ten. So I guess we can say the COVID pause didn't completely get the best of Michigan. But let's go ahead and do a case study, Matt. We see a team like Michigan able to win off of a COVID pause, albeit it was ragged. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't what we have come to expect from Michigan basketball this year. How would you grade them against other teams that have come off COVID pauses so far this year?
I'd put them right up there with the best of them, to be honest. I think clearly they're not. Gonzaga's coming off of COVID pause. They were outstanding. So they're not up there with Gonzaga, who right away dominated an Iowa team from start to finish. So they're not quite up there, but they're right up there with the best of them. I think it was just, again, it's one of those teams. They're a good team and they're an older team. And I think that's what makes all the difference in these pauses when you're coming off, because Michigan, I'd give them an A. Overall, I would, because they ended up winning the game. They beat a good Wisconsin team, and it just took them some time to figure things out again. And it's just like a beginning of a regular season, right? You're just going to take you time. You don't see things on the court. You're doing all these things through Zoom meetings, and it's just not quite the same as being on the court, getting that speed in. Even practice speed is different than game speed. So it's a whole different level when you're going from a Zoom trying to pick up that speed and then going into straight to the game. So I would give them an A. I think there have been a few teams that have done better, mainly Gonzaga, probably Baylor as well. But I think, again, that those two teams are an echelon above Michigan still at this point.
I know that we talked about this in an earlier episode this season. The more experienced teams are going to be the ones that are still in it late in the tournament, even in conference tournaments as well. And experience really does outrank everything. I'm looking at you, Kentucky, when I say that. But we have other teams, though, that have been on COVID pauses that were really darlings at the beginning of the season. Richmond comes to mind as one of the first ones. They beat Kentucky, which now doesn't look like that big of a win, but at the time it was. Then they went on a COVID pause, and now I believe they're in Joe Lunardi's first four out of the NCAA tournament, and we'll talk about that later as well. I'm teasing a lot here in Block A. But I wonder how different it would be if Michigan wasn't Michigan, if Michigan was, say, in Richmond's position or in St. Louis's position. Do you think this turns out any differently?
Quite possibly. And I think Michigan is the type of team, and I think they have a type of coach who has given them the sense of just this willingness to go out there and compete no matter what. And we saw in their first half, their offense wasn't great. And they clearly turned that around, but I think their second half, it was more focused on their defense. And I think that's what these teams have to do coming back. I did watch St. Louis's first game back against Dayton, and they were in the game. Their defense, for the most part, was pretty good, but their shots, they could not hit a shot. They couldn't play offense. They couldn't get rhythm within their flow. And just that was where they really struggled. And in the end, Jalen Crutcher had one of his amazing games, which in any normal time, that's hard to stop for Dayton anyway. So St. Louis had that. Richmond has kind of struggled with their offense too, and kind of that flow. And that's a team who is experienced, who does have that. So their pause is a little more surprising. And then even Villanova, their first game back, I want to say, it was against Seton Hall. And they won the game and they played really well. But if you watch that game, especially as time went on, a lot of their 3-point shots, they were not hitting because they were falling just short. They were short on all their shots. So those are the big things really kind of looking into. And Drake is another team. Their first game back after their long pause, they were down almost 20 points in the first half to Missouri State, and they came back and made that turnaround as well. So it's just really what these coaches are really exemplifying in them, that willingness to win. And just really, when you come back, you really have to buy in on defense. And if you're not buying in on defense, your whole game kind of gets lost, because so much of your offense is built on your defense. And so moving forward, that's got to be the main focus of a lot of these teams coming back, because that's something you can still do.
Well, you hear it a lot on just telecast, defense leading to offense. I want to finish up this block with one last question about Michigan. With this win, coming off a COVID pause now, they've only lost one time. Are they the overall favorites now in the Big Ten to not just win the regular season title, but maybe even win the conference title, considering they've been through that COVID pause, they weathered the storm, they won a game right out of the gate?
I mean, at this point, you have to definitely put them in there, that conversation. And looking at KenPom, the rest of their schedule so far, I'm sure there's going to be some adjustments, but they have Ohio State and they have Iowa. The rest of the games, Rutgers, Indiana, and Michigan State, they should win those pretty easily. So you're looking at maybe 2 games that they could lose. And I believe that puts them ahead of any other team within the conference still. So I would look at Michigan to win the conference. I don't know if the Big Ten has come out with any special circumstances. I know some conferences are saying, I saw one the other day was they're taking win percentage times the number of games they've played to determine their seedings for the conference tournament. I know another one has done other similar things like that, they're adding metrics into theirs as well. So I don't know if I've heard exactly if the Big Ten is doing anything like that, but I think with Michigan's remaining schedule on the board, you have to believe that they are in position to win it and probably the favorites going in, because the next closest is Ohio State with 4 losses. And if they lose those 2, Michigan's still out in front.
Well, we'll definitely talk about that at a later date, because the different methods of getting teams seeded in their conference tournament could have a major effect on how those tournaments play out. You could have a best team in the conference that hasn't played as many games get seeded 8th or 9th and have an easy run at the championship game. So we'll talk about that in the future episode. For now, though, we'll go ahead and take a break. Still to come, Matt Karner's best and worst of the weekend. Maybe I'll have something in there as well. Probably not, but we'll see. Along with a 3-point play and our second topic of the day, featuring the mock tournament field that just came out this weekend. We'll be right back. This is The Review. Back on The Review, best and worst of the weekend coming up here in probably about 15-20 minutes. Otherwise, though, we'll head into this B block with the stories that were biggest in college hoops since we last saw you. And it starts off with our favorite people to hate and really just nitpick all of their decisions. The NCAA selection committee. Guys, you put out a bracket this week. It was a mock bracket. It was really just the top 16, though, I believe, is what they put out there, which is all anybody seems to care about, because these are, I think this year out of any, it's going to be very chalk in terms of the seeds winning, unless you have if there's an upset this year, it would probably be even bigger an upset than ever. I digress, though. That mock bracket, the biggest story of that were the 2 remaining undefeated teams. Where were they going to be? Who was going to be the number 1 overall seed? And lo and behold, Gonzaga holds on by the narrowest of margins over number 2 Baylor. The remaining number 1 seed line teams, Michigan, Ohio State. Number 2 line, Illinois, Villanova, Alabama, and Houston. The 3 line, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. And the 4 line, Iowa, Texas Tech, Texas, and Missouri. Matt, I'm not sure there were any surprises for me in the top 16, at least. After the weekend's action, though, were there any surprises in your eyes?
No, I don't believe so. It wasn't the exact top 16 I had heading into the weekend. I had Wisconsin and Kansas in there as well, but they were the 2 that I did not have were my next 2-5, and that was Oklahoma and Texas Tech. So they're all right there. I don't think there's anything shocking in it. I think it gave us a little more insight as to the committee. I had Ohio State above Michigan, and I think that was more based on the number of wins and quality wins that they had. But Michigan has done their job with the chances they've had, and so I think the committee will be focusing a lot on that, not necessarily the number of wins you have, but the quality that you've done with the opportunities that you've had. And that's the biggest takeaway I took from it.
Only other story from the weekend, it's getting close to that time of year, Matt, where we start looking at the best college players in the game. Who's going to leave for the draft? Who's going to go to the draft combine? Who's going pro right away? We don't pay attention really that much to the WNBA draft, but let's just say a certain number one overall pick potential player has been getting a lot of texts recently. So Charlie Collier, Texas forward, native of Mont Belvieu, Texas. That's 30 miles out of Houston. So naturally, Dallas Wings, they trade for the first overall pick. I think they have 5 of the top 10 picks in next year's WNBA draft, which is just absurd in any sport when that happens. Like, how all the other teams in the league could let that happen is beyond me. Now, because of that, since she's the potential number one overall pick, everybody's asking her, oh, do you know that you're probably going to be really close to home when you're playing in the WNBA? She's a junior, but she's eligible because she is over 22 years old, which is also a very odd rule that you have to be that old to be eligible for the WNBA draft. Anyway, though, she says, though, she feels right now as a player that she has to focus on the current season. And she knows that when the time comes at the end of the season, she'll sit down with her mom, her coach, and they'll make a decision about that. A very mature statement, even for a collegiate athlete. You do see a lot of those, but this is something completely different. This is about your professional career when it comes down to it. Are you going to stay an extra year? Are you going to go? And I think she's handling it like a pro.
Yeah, she absolutely is. I think that's the best way you can handle it, because especially in the women's game, I mean, you're going to get paid much more than you get in college, but they still don't get nearly as much as the men. So it's not anything surprising. I think we saw Sabrina Ionescu for Oregon do the same thing, come back for her senior year when they looked like they had the chance to win national championship. Unfortunately, we never got to potentially experience that tournament. So I think it's great for her to still have that decision in her mind, and she's not making up her mind quite yet.
Women's college basketball players are just dominant. When they're really good, like when you're Sabrina Ionescu good or Paige Becker's good, you just dominant and no one can stop you. And it's fun to watch. Anyway, those were the biggest stories in college hoops since we last saw you. Now let's head back to the present for our second topic of the day. I do want to backtrack to one of those stories we just talked about, though, the field of the top 16 teams the committee put out there. We know who the committee has in their first 4 lines now. That's great. We don't know who they have in the rest of the field, but we can kind of piecemeal it together based upon who we have in our rankings as well as the other major outlets. So I want to go with Joe Lunardi's predictions as a baseline for this question, Matt. His last 4 in right now are VCU, Stanford, Oregon, and Colorado State. His first 4 out are Connecticut, St. Louis, Richmond, Western Kentucky. I'd like to know who you have in your last 4 in and who you have in your first 4 out.
Yeah, so heading into the weekend, my last 4 in were Drake, Boise State, LSU, and Stanford. And then my first 4 out was UConn, Penn State, Maryland, and SMU. Based on results of the weekend, the only one that's by far going to drop is Penn State with their loss to Nebraska. And Maryland, I'm definitely going to have to reevaluate based on the way the committee evaluated the top 16 as well, because their record's not great, but they've also just had a lot of opportunities. I think the last time I looked at their team sheet, they were like 4-10 in quad 1, didn't play a quad 2 game, and then they hadn't lost any other games outside of that quad. So that's where they become tricky. But I think Lunardi's, there's nothing surprising there to me. I think the two that are the most interesting to me are UConn and St. Louis. UConn is the type of team, when you evaluate just their overall resume, I would say they're probably around the 8 or 9 seed. However, a good chunk of that resume was done with James Bouknight. And right now he's not playing, and their resume without him is not as great. They did get a great win over Xavier, though, this weekend. So that's going to be suiting well for them, especially if Bouknight is coming back. There's been speculation that he might be coming back and playing a few games. So it's good there. And then St. Louis is just one of those, they've played nothing. And so they are just really hard to evaluate and see where they go. And that's kind of the biggest thing. I think the best thing for them is LSU got a good win this weekend too, and they beat LSU earlier on. So that's going to help them in that process too.
So out of those 8 teams you mentioned then, is there one that's trending way upward for you right now? And is there one that's trending way downward?
I would say VCU is on the way up right now. They took care of business this weekend, beat St. Bonaventure. I believe they currently are sitting in first in the A10, and that's going to be big. A10 is definitely going. It should get more than one bid. It's looking probably more towards 3, and I think winning that conference is going to be good for them. On the way down right now of Lenardi's teams, I guess none of them stuck out. None of them had a bad loss this weekend. None of them did anything terrible. The one that I have my eye on the most of his is probably Colorado State. They have done well. They've played the best of Mountain West so far, and they split all those series. So they've done that. They didn't really have much of a non-conference to boost that resume even more. So it's really just going to come down to, can they win these games that they should coming up and what they can do. But if they get a loss with what their remaining schedule is, it's going to be more detrimental than the rest of them, I believe.
Well, guys, we talk about the tournament a lot because it's the one thing to look forward to in college basketball. Like, sure, you have the Big Ten ACC challenge, the SEC Big 12 challenge, but what does all that lead up to? Guys, come on. It's the NCAA tournament. If you win those games, you get in. And that's why we talk about it a lot. And we'll be talking about it a little more later in the episode. That's called foreshadowing. Anyway, though, we'll hit our next break. Still to come. Best and worst of the weekend, along with Matt's least favorite segment to play, our 3-point play. Different format this time, so maybe he'll actually get some points and climb up the leaderboard. We'll be right back, though. This is The Review. Well, the snow is starting to fall in Syracuse as that winter storm warning is rearing its ugly head here. Obviously, it's a little better than the negative 30 degrees that Matt Karner is feeling right now in Wisconsin. But we're back here nonetheless on The Review. C Block coming at you. We have our best and worst of the weekend coming up, along with our 3-point play. Matt Karner right now pretty deep down in the standings, but has a chance to move up to second place, right behind Matt Majinski, who told me, I was with him on Saturday night. We went to have a little kind of snack dinner at an Applebee's near here. And we were doing different trivia. And I actually based today's 3-point play off of said trivia that we did. I'll tell that story when we get to it. Big shout out to Dan Baldwin, another fellow Syracuse graduate student who actually got us on this train. It was a great train. I won one of those, actually. So I was very proud of myself. For now, though, we'll go ahead and get to our best and worst of the weekend. Matt Karner, you're up first.
Yeah, so I'll start with my worst. I got to say it's Penn State's home loss to Nebraska. This is a team that was on the bubble, and that really they're going to need to do a lot to make themselves back on the bubble and even into the NCAA tournament. So that's not a loss that you can take, especially at home. Surprisingly, with the coaching change throughout the season, they've been playing well this year. But unfortunately, that loss did occur. So Penn State gets that for me this week. And my best I'm going to give to the Missouri Valley Conference. I think it wasn't maybe necessarily the exact best way it could happen for the Missouri Valley with Loyola and Drake. But they split the series, which I think was what was needed to make that a multi-bid league. And there was 30 of 40 minutes that were extremely competitive played in those two games, more than 40 minutes because it was a overtime game in the second one. So I think Drake did what they needed to do, especially without their leading scorer on the court with an injury, to make themselves up there. Loyola's numbers and their overall just metrics of pretty much every account are up there to where they're most likely going to be an NCAA tournament team no matter what. So Drake did what they needed to do to put themselves in that position and make the Missouri Valley Conference a multi-bid league.
shout out Missouri Valley Conference. We love the mid-majors here. And I believe it was a pick that we made last week. And obviously Sam Bass, who's a big Drake homer, picked them to win both. I think Steve Kirk picked the teams to split, so well done to the boys from Friday. My worst of the weekend, I'll start with that. Getting embarrassed on Friday with a late postponement. I believe it was SMU and Wichita State. Thought it was going to be a really competitive game. And then I get an email from Steve Kirk saying, hey, by the way, this game got postponed. You should probably scratch it from the rundown like half an hour before the show started. So I was a little peeved at that. Best of the weekend, though, again, Matt Majinski asking me about Bellarmine University for the first time all year and telling me that he watched one of their games on ESPN Plus. Got the sweep of Northern Alabama this week. First game was pretty close. Second game wasn't. They win by 24 in game 2 of 2, and they go into their last 4 games still alone in the A-Sun, having to play Liberty, of course, to keep hold of that lead. But they're in prime position to win the conference in their first year, and I will continue to ride them. And the fact that the transition rule is the dumbest rule that could be in place, especially in a COVID year. I mean, even the Ivy League is changing their policies, NCAA. They're letting grad transfers play there for a 5th year. Like, what are you doing? If the Ivy League's changing stuff, they're obviously smarter than all of us, so we might as well do the same. Anyway, that's our best and worst of the weekend, and now we head into my favorite segment of these episodes, our 3/4 point play. And Matt, you know the original rules. We're scratching the original rules for today. So today's 3-point play is a little different, changed up the format. It's just one question today, all right? Now, this one question, though, has a potential to be a 4-point question. Now, here's the thing. You're going to get 3 strikes, okay? So this involves listing off certain schools, okay? And I'm going to be asking you to list off 20 schools, okay? 5 correct schools gets you 1 point. And this should be at least semi-easy until you get farther back in history, because you have to name the last 20 NCAA tournament champions. And here's a catch. We're not doing repeats. So it's just the last 20 schools that have won a national championship. So you can't, if we were going back this far, you can't just rattle off UCLA 12 times because they won it like that many times in a row. The context of this is that my man Dan Baldwin and Matt Majinski, like I said, we were at Applebee's on Saturday night, and Dan Baldwin's friend had asked him a trivia question. Can you name me the last 5 Super Bowl champions, Stanley Cup champions, World Series champions, and NBA champions, no repeats? And it was a very interesting trivia question, so we're doing it here. So, Matt, you have 3 strikes. You need 20 schools that have won a national championship, the most recent 20 schools.
All right. We'll start off with Virginia, and then Villanova and UNC. 2016 was Villanova again, so 2015 should have been Duke. 2014 then would have been UConn. We're still counting Louisville in there, I'm assuming. And then
I was debating whether or not we were going to take schools that had some speculation about it. If you want to go one extra, feel free. I don't have it down here, but I'm pretty sure I know who it is. But yes, we will count Louisville in this case.
Okay, so that was 2013, 2012 was Kentucky. 11 would have been UConn again, Duke 15. 2009. All right. Well, I did better than I thought for the first 10.
You haven't gotten 10 yet.
Well, close to 10 years at least. I know there's some repeats in there. So I know Florida had 2 in there, 06 and 07, I believe. Michigan State would be in there because they're 2000 and there were some repeats. So I'm done with the Big Ten now. So that's good to know. Syracuse is in there. Let me see here. Maryland would be in there as well. Kansas, 8. I'm going to say Arizona. I don't even know what I'm at anymore.
Would you like me to give you a head count?
Yeah, that'd be great.
You're at 13.
13. Okay.
You have no strikes so far.
Let's see here. Now is where it's a big guess because I can't even think of the years that teams have won completely yet. Trying to think who else. No. Oof. All right. Ooh, man. Let's go ahead and just throw out. I don't know if it's going to go back this far, but I'll throw out UCLA.
That's correct.
Well, it is. Okay, so we are going there. So then.
It's not as far back as you think it is. They've won a championship pretty recently.
They did. I'll give you Georgetown.
That is correct.
Okay. So then let's go NC State.
That is correct.
And then Houston.
That's your first strike.
Okay. Who else was in that grouping back then? Now I'm just drawing a complete blank for the rest of these. Past 20. I think the years that I'm struggling. Oh, UNLV.
That is correct.
Is my 90s aren't so great. I was a little too young. I didn't fully pay attention yet. Yeah, I'm stumped now. The rest of these.
You only got 3 left, so you might as well go for it.
Let's go with. Let's throw Indiana.
That is correct. Even though you said you were done with the Big Ten like 5 minutes ago.
I did not think we were going this far back, but we are. Let's see. Who else? Georgia Tech in there?
That's your second strike.
Yeah. All right. Let's. No. Oh, Marquette.
That is your third strike.
You're just Final Four.
Yeah. So we went back all the way. I believe this was to NC State's 1983 national championship is how far this went back for 20 schools. The 2 you didn't get were Michigan and Arkansas. So
yeah,
not easy ones to get because that's a long way away. But you got 18 of them. That's 90%. You got yourself 3 points. You're working your way up the board now. That puts you tied with Matt Waldman, Ariel Putterman. I think at the end of the year, what we may do is that one of these episodes is just going to be a quiz episode where it's like the final 3-point play. And I'll work that up a little bit now. The top 3 or 4 will be there, and whoever wins will get as many points as it takes to win. So if you stay within 2 to 3 points of the leader, which you will, because I'm not cutting anybody any breaks, like if there are groups of people here, you should be good to go. But that was our 3-point play. The best performance Matt Karner's had in quite a while. Thank goodness, because he was on a real cold streak there. Moves himself up into second place in the 3-point play standings. We'll go ahead and take our final break of the day. When we come back, we'll close up shop, and Matt Karner will give us the stories that he's looking forward to for the upcoming week of college hoops, if there are any, because as he said last time, it was a pretty dead week for college basketball. We'll be right back, though. This is The Review. Getting set to close up shop here on The Review. It's the D block. Snow continues to fall out the window that I am really sitting right next to right now in the editing suites of Syracuse University. There's a nice wall behind Matt Karner there. He's coming off a pretty good 3-point play trivia segment, which will boost his confidence for next week when he ultimately fails again. But we're going to go ahead and look forward to this upcoming week with Matt Karner's stories to keep your eyes on in college basketball.
Yeah, so I'm sticking with the mid-major this week. Mid-majors. I think the biggest one is the race in the Mountain West Conference. 1.5 games are separating the top 4 teams. And you've got Utah State at Boise State starting on Wednesday. And those are the top 2 teams tied at the top of the standings. That's going to be big for the conference as well as for NCAA tournament implications. And then the next 2, San Diego State and Colorado State, they are right there with them, and they both are on the road against Fresno State and Nevada, which are the 5th and 6th teams in the conference. So all top 6 teams are playing each other this weekend in the Mountain West. It should be really this week leading into the weekend, and so it should be really exciting to see that and watch those moving forward. Then I'm watching these next 2 kind of go more into the weekend, but Conference USA, Western Kentucky taking on North Texas. Both are leading their respective divisions in their conference, tied 8-2 in the conference. Now would be Friday and Saturday. And then I'm really just keeping my eye on Belmont. 1 loss right now on the season, 4 games remaining on their schedule. So they could finish 26-1 in the regular season. And that 1 lone loss was early in the season when I believe they did not have everyone back on their team because of the early season COVID pause. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform this last Thursday, Saturday, and then next week, Thursday, Saturday as well. And just does their resume, if they finish the regular season 26-1 and they don't win their conference tournament, could they be a bid stealer and get into the NCAA tournament with a record like that and the type of team that they are?
Yeah, you think of a team like Belmont, Dylan Windler, Belmont legend. I was going to throw this out here earlier, but I forgot. I was planning this on the way over. I got a COVID test this morning and came straight to the editing suite. I was thinking about like the old Michigan players, like Spike Albrecht, Michigan Wolverine legend. I'm pretty sure that he's got to hold the record for like best 3-point shooting percentage in an NCAA tournament because he was like pretty much perfect until the national championship game. That Louisville team that we all thought like shouldn't have it, by the way, that you asked me about in the 3-point play was the team that beat them, I'm pretty sure. So Spike Albrecht, Trey Burke, Glenn Robinson, all Michigan Wolverine legends. The Fab Five has nothing on that team. That's my hot take for the day. That's about as bad as Sam Bass's Ohio State's a perennial national championship. Anyway, you mentioned a couple teams that are in our game picks today. Let's go ahead and make them. We got 10 for you, I think. Let me add. Yep, that's 10. Starting with the ACC. So Florida State and Virginia are both ranked, and 2 of the top teams in the ACC. Virginia, I watched one of their games this last weekend, I'm pretty sure. Who were they playing this weekend? They were playing North Carolina, and they were up pretty big on them for a while. Only gave up 18 points in the entire first half. Roy Williams was just looking exasperated, like on the sideline. He like just leaning back in his chair, hands on his head, like, oh my God, what's my team doing offensively right now? And they took North Carolina out of their game of rebounding and tip backs off free throws. How will Virginia fare against a at least historically similarly sized team, the Florida State Seminoles?
I mean, Virginia is just one of those teams you got to love them even more later in the season because of the type of game they play, their defense. They're going to constantly get better and better because of their defense. They can stay in games and let their offense do the work. This is a game that I think we're not looking at, but Florida State and Virginia, they're the top of the ACC. One of them has won it since all the way back to 2018. I'm sorry about that. But all the way back to 2018. And so they're the top of the conference.
What is going on there?
I'm in our school building right now, and I guess we're having a class change really quick. at work.
Recess. This is like Recess from the old Disney Channel.
Yeah.
TJ getting it done.
But these are two teams. I like Virginia in this one still. Florida State definitely has the offensive power to take them down, but Virginia's creeping up there. Not a tremendous resume, but they're getting done what they need to potentially sneak into that conversation for that one of those last one seeds.
Can I just say, Gus Griswold and Ashley Spinelli were underrated characters in that television series.
Absolutely.
Vince was he was a boss. Like, I love that guy. And Gretchen, the tall one with the glasses, and TJ were just like, that's an underrated television show. It
is. I actually just finished rewatching all of it, and the jokes that I understand now as an adult that I had no idea were happening as a kid was just amazing.
I remember there was a special day that was summer vacation, and some guy was like using the school for some like weird, like not evil thing, but just kind of like convoluted plot that no one as a kid can understand. And the gang gets back together to like break into the school over summer. It was fantastic. I love that show. They should reboot that. It was a great show, or just at least show reruns.
True. Very true.
I don't remember if it was on Cartoon Network or the Disney Channel, but it was fantastic. Grade A material. That was the golden era. Now you get like Loud House. Like, why? Like, the old stuff was better. There a ton of it. I have like the Nickelodeon basketball game actually. Like the old CD-ROM you put into your PC, and you have like SpongeBob and Sandy Cheeks like dunking from the 3-point line. Oh my goodness,
the good stuff. That was the good stuff.
If in case you didn't know, audience, we are at least semi into pop culture, out mostly for kids' cartoons and political dramas on Amazon Prime. You never know. We'll move back into the basketball realm of things, though. It reminds me of Dan Schulman and Jay Billis calling a Villanova game and discussing the college football playoff and saying, "We interrupt this football conversation for a Mikal Bridges dunk and a block at the other end." And that was our moment right there. That was great. TCU, they play Texas Tech twice this week. It's not often that you see one of these Power 5 conferences have like a quasi doubleheader. We've seen that in like a lot of mid-major conferences this year, not in like the Big 12, but TCU is playing Texas Tech on Monday, and they play them again on Wednesday. So an interesting turn of events with a Power 5 conference having to play a semi back-to-back.
Yeah. I mean, got to make up those games right now. So I think it's good that they're able to do that. I definitely like Texas Tech in both of these games. I think potentially TCU could make the second one interesting because they're going to be able to do that in-person scout. And I think seeing Mac McClung in person and then playing him a few days later is much different than just watching him on film and trying to figure out how to guard him. So I think they might be able to potentially do something differently on defense in that second game to give Texas Tech some struggles, but I still like Tech in both of those games.
Moving on to the Big East, St. John's, the Red Storm, even in conference play, a good 7-7, going up against Xavier, 11-3 and 4-3 in the Big East.
Yeah, Xavier's one of those teams. They have had a great season so far, but they have not played too much. And they have been on, 7 games. They've played half of the amount of games that St. John's has played in the Big East right now. So they're one of those big question marks too. And how great are they truly? I do think I will take Xavier in this one. I think that they have been playing pretty well throughout. I know they lost to UConn here recently. But Paul Scruggs to me has been a huge jump for this team throughout the whole season from where he was last season. I think losing Najee Marshall was actually the best thing to happen for Paul Scruggs because he has been playing a tremendous on all ends of the floor and then all aspects of the offensive game. So I'm going to stick with Xavier in this one because I think he will be able to handle that pressure that St. John's will apply here and there. That was their 5 minutes, so we should be good now the rest of the way.
I was about to say that I wonder if that was the school agreeing with your take as well, because That's a throwback. I didn't have a bell like that. It was always just the public address, that like annoying like beeping sound. It
Yeah.
would just go on forever and you get pissed off about it. Sorry, London. Anyway, that was a PFT reference. Sorry, London. Anyway, it seems like every other week, like every other day, we have a ranked on ranked matchup in the Big 12. So naturally, we had to put this one in. Usually it's called Red River because of the football teams. I'm going to say it's Red River because of their basketball teams are better than their football teams were this year. Oklahoma taking on Texas, number 12 against number 13.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think Oklahoma, and we saw where the committee placed them this weekend, so that was huge for them. Texas was up there as well. Oklahoma has probably been playing better basketball as of late. Texas has struggled a little bit since they came off of their pause and play some of their games. They didn't get to play with everybody. In their last game, though, they really started to look like the team that they once were when they took down TCU. So I think Texas is getting back to that point. But because the game is at Oklahoma, I'm going to stick with them in this one. I think that whatever Lon Kruger is doing there is tremendous, and he is one of those coaches that is up there for National Coach of the Year because of everything that he's done. So I'm going to stick with Oklahoma, and I think he'll figure out a way to slow down those guards on Texas.
All right, let's go fast here for these next four. You already mentioned this game. You talked about it in detail. Boise State against Utah State.
I think I'm going to stick with Boise State here. I think they are the better team overall, and they're going to get the job done in the Mountain West.
All right, next up, an up and down Syracuse Orange team heading to Louisville to take on the Cardinals.
I like Louisville. I think they'll be able to handle the zone pretty easily.
Everybody's high on VCU, including you. You have them trending upward out of that last four in. They take on Richmond this week, a team that's sitting on the fringe right outside the tournament field. Can Richmond get themselves back in the tournament picture?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think I'm going to stick with VCU because I believe they've been more consistent throughout the season. And so I'm just going to stick with my gut there and go with them. But that should be an extremely good game to watch.
And then the last game in our fast break, Belmont against Jacksonville State.
Belmont all the way.
Yeah, I saw that coming. We'll take the last two a little bit slower now. So Wisconsin, they came off a very hard-fought yet a bad loss, got a sour taste in their mouth. They only scored 20 points in the second half. That's not good for any team who wants to do well offensively. Now they play Iowa. Two teams, same record, 15-6, 9-5 in the Big Ten. Who gets the leg up?
Iowa's last game with Michigan State was just completely dominating performance. And Michigan State, I'm double checking right now, but they held Luka Garza to, I believe, 8 points, and they won by 30 at Michigan State. And I know Michigan State's having a down year, but that's still absolutely crazy. So if they can have that performance and then they get the performance that they need from Garza as well, that's an Iowa team that we are waiting to fully see and to sustain that. They've had glimpses of it, but they haven't had it yet. Wisconsin, they don't surprise me as much this year. I think everyone was really high on them in the preseason, and they're an older team. They're a good team, but it also feels like a lot of their players last season and this season, they've already reached their potential. They're just not going to take the next steps. So I'm going to stick with Iowa in this one. I think Garza and their three-point shot on the outside is just too much for Wisconsin to handle. Do they double or not and everything like that. So I'm going to stick with Iowa.
And then finally, we don't talk about the Pac-12 a lot because usually there's nothing really to talk about in the Pac-12. There are two pretty good teams that are going to be facing off against each other this week, though. Arizona visiting UCLA. And the Pac-12 has kind of flown under the radar this year. UCLA really up there towards the top, behind USC still. But they're nipping at their heels. And then Arizona is looking to get back in the race as well. Who wins this one?
I like UCLA in this one. I think Arizona, they are a good team, but UCLA is definitely more talented, and UCLA should be up there. But the Pac-12, for some reason, those top schools have just lost a game or two to the bottom feeders, and it hurts them and it hurts their seeding in March and everything. But I think UCLA is just going to get the job done. Mick Cronin there has done a tremendous job turning the program back around, and it has it on the rise. And so hopefully we'll have UCLA back in the national conversation more often in the years to come with him.
In the way that like college football is better when Miami and Texas are good, college basketball is better when UCLA is at the forefront because they're just such a big name in college basketball. And that's how we'll end it. Very good picks, Matt. You had a good episode today. This was a great bounce back episode. This was your get right game.
My redemption.
Exactly. Your get right game from the review. Thanks for joining us, Matt. And thank you guys, all of you watching. We appreciate your support. This has been episode 16 of season 1 of the review. Check social media for our pages to finally come to fruition. I'm working on that hard this week. I have it down on my to-do list, and hopefully I'll get some help from the boss man. Otherwise, keep an eye out for maybe a quiz series. I'm in the works on that, trying to figure out how that would go together. And we're doing good stuff, and we're only growing, guys. Thanks for watching. This has been the review, episode 16. Have a great week of watching college basketball, and stay warm across the country because it looks like winter weather is hitting everywhere. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.